I'm Candace Harrison, and I'm honored to be here to talk to Miss Jennifer McCary about We Dance. So we're just going to have a really just as friendly of a conversation as we can have, less interviewee and more like just a conversation between the two of us. So I'm going to start by asking you, you've been an artist a long time. We know you a different way, a lot of us, right? But you at the core are artists. So tell me, like, when did you decide, I'm an artist? When did you start actually identifying yourself as an artist?
I was probably in 7th or 8th grade when I first identified as an artist, and I started doing art well before that, but it was the fact that, in school I had a great set of art teachers growing up, and in 7th grade, my art teacher, Keith Holliday, he was a really serious artist, well-known artist, charcoal artist, and I think that because he was teaching us a craft at such a high level, I got into it and I realized wow, I'm good at this. And it wasn't like that for me in every aspect of school. I was great at reading and writing, social studies, all those things, but there were other areas where I really struggled. And so I was an athlete, and so I excelled in that area. But to find another space in school, it was 7th or 8th grade for sure. I remember taking home a piece and my parents framing it. And they were like, "This is incredible." And I took pride in the fact that my parents took pride in my work in that way, and that wasn't new. I had been drawing since I was 4, right? But that's when I really realized the validation from my art teacher, the validation from my family, that art was a part of my identity.
That's awesome. And this is the mic that we're working with. It feels very game show like, so I feel like as I'm talking, I'm as I'm going. So just so you know, if you're wondering why are we trying to navigate 2 mics, this is what we have. So we're doing our thing with what we have. So I know you said you had a good teacher. So would you say that's who inspired you, or did you get inspiration from anyone or anything else to be an artist?
Yeah. So funny enough, people in this room who know me know that I found my original art inspiration from Bob Ross. I used to watch Bob Ross, an American artist who was really famous from PBS. I used to watch Bob Ross all the time, and I still go to sleep to my family's laughing. I still go to sleep to Bob Ross. There's something very soothing about his voice, but he taught you how to paint in a way where I just picked up on it. I could do what he was doing, and so I found inspiration there. Honestly, when I was 4 or 5, I used to run around the street all the time with sidewalk chalk in my hand, and I would draw on the ground these murals of mountains and different ocean scenes and things like that, trying to mimic Bob Ross. So he was my early inspiration. I certainly found other artists who inspired me. There was a local Cleveland artist who's still active, Jerome T. White, and his artwork was something that inspired me. My art teachers, as I mentioned, David Driscoll, who's an artist that some people may know, and I had the chance before he passed away to actually meet David Driscoll, which was great. But what inspired me more about David Driscoll than his artistry was his curating. And so if you all remember the artwork from The Cosby Show, that was something that inspired me early on, because it was one of the first times, not only was that show pivotal because it showed you a black family who was really prominent, but it showed you black art and black music and things of that nature. And in some ways, I shouldn't preface it with black, because art is art and music is music, right? But that representation was also so important, to see artwork with faces of people who look like me and my family. And David Driscoll was one of the curators of The Cosby Show. And so he definitely inspired me even later on in life, when I got more into the screen printing work and seeing what he was doing there. Who else inspired me? Today, I'm inspired by Chantel Martin. She's a really dynamic, fun artist who uses Sharpie markers and just uses black markers to draw all over the space and places. And, she started off with wall murals, and it shifted where now her art is in museums and on T-shirts and tennis shoes and things of that nature. And so she's really fun. So I could go on and on, but those are some of the early folks who come to mind.
And that's interesting that at such a young age, you had an interest in who the artists were, because I also remember, the music and hearing music that I heard at home on the Cosby Show, music that I grew up to, they were growing up to it also, and then seeing the art and remembering, key pieces that hung in their home, but I never knew who the artists were, so that lets you know you were kind of destined for that in the future because you really had an interest in it, you know what I mean? Yeah. So some people may know, some people may not, that you were an art major in college, and so you majored in stone sculpture. Mm-hmm. Is that something you set out to do? And if it's not, how did you find that program?
Yeah, so I did not set out to do that. I'll start with that. I was supposed to go to school for basketball. No, I'm serious. I was supposed to go to school to be a basketball player. My parents spent a lot of time taking me to different campuses, and I spent a lot of time with different teams, and I was always playing basketball, and people thought that I was destined to go to school for basketball and then to go into the WNBA. And my passion was art, and there was something in my heart, even though my parents also took me to art institutes. I don't want to make it seem like they were only supporting one thing. They took me to art institutes for those interviews too. I realized that that was what I wanted to pursue, and that basketball, while I was good at it, it wasn't what I was passionate about. And so actually, without even telling my parents, I shifted gears entirely and went to Bowling Green State University. And so when I got there, they dropped me off, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to be an art education major. And art education, I figured at least teaching has some security, right? And so after doing that, you need certain electives to continue. So I was doing art education in ceramics, and in ceramics I was sculpting. And so I was looking for an elective, and I saw one that said sculpture, and Sean Morwin was the professor. And I go in the first week of classes, and I'm sitting down at this big block table, and Sean comes in and he hurls a piece of limestone in the center of the table, and he says, "This is your medium." And I said, I signed up for the wrong class. It's time for me to withdraw. I thought this was going to be like a ceramic sculpture class. And Sean said, give it 1 week, Jennifer. And he said, there was a prerequisite to get into this class that we waived for you. So give it a chance and see what happens. And by the end of that week, I was so intrigued with the power that I felt from using those big tools and, learning a hammer and chisel, that I said, I'm going to stick with this and see what happens. And, it was destiny, because I ended up saying I'm going to double major in this. And I did stone work through undergrad and grad. And so, no, it was one of those things that Bob Ross actually would have called a happy accident. So, I'm glad that it happened. Ironically, this is the first show that I've done that doesn't have any three-dimensional pieces. There's no stonework here. It's entirely two-dimensional. And some of that was because this was me just trying to push myself to get back into doing solo exhibitions. I've done a couple of group shows over the last few years, but I haven't done a solo exhibition since 2010. And some of that is because if you know stone, it takes a long time to work with it. It's fragile, it's complex, it's beautiful, but it takes a lot of work. And given all the other things happening in my life, I didn't necessarily have the time to get back into it. And so this show challenged me just to center my art again. But it also challenged me because it was in mediums that were not my first. So, well, actually, they are my first. I can't say that. They are my first, but I hadn't touched them in so long because I had identified as a stone sculptor.
That's awesome. And that's, something we can all take, even if you're not in the artist, realm, and you don't consider yourself a creative person. How many times do we see something like right away and like, oh, no, this is wrong. I'm leaving. I don't like it. It's too much. And then, somebody is right there to push you into sticking with it. And then it turns out to be something that we actually turn out to love. So that's a really great lesson. I think we all can take something from that, even though it's not in artistry. So, thinking about your first exhibition ever, which was probably a while ago if you haven't shown anything since 2010, it's hard to believe that, that was so long ago. What do you think that you've learned about yourself from that exhibition to We Dance?
My art is always centered around connections. It's always centered around relationships and people and justice. And my first show, when I think about that exhibition, it was a combination of 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional works. I wove in relationships into each piece, the stone pieces as well as the paintings. And I even had, in that very first exhibition, I had made my own Monopoly board before it was a thing that Monopoly came in different formats. And every single piece was about family. It was about unity. It was about this togetherness that I wanted to see and experience and for others to experience. Mm-hmm. And so in that way, not a lot has changed. But what I've learned is that my art is how I voice the things that I can't in my everyday life. And so one of the things that, I recently presented on at a conference was the difference between being a DEI professional and an activist. And so as a DEI professional, a lot of times, and people wouldn't know this, diversity, equity, and inclusion is what I'm referring to when I say DEI, you bite your tongue a lot. And although you speak truth and you try to bring equity and inclusion to spaces, there are a lot of things that you feel that you can't speak on. Mm-hmm. And so what I've learned about myself from that first exhibition to now is that my art is where my own voice comes out about the things that may be bothering me or the things that are bringing me joy. And this exhibition in particular has really done that for me, and especially because of the time period in which I started doing this work. 2019 is the oldest piece that's out there on display. 2023 is the most recent. Mm-hmm. And you all can think through what has happened in this world from 2019 to 2023. And so I would say I've learned that even though I can't be an activist or an advocate in my day-to-day work for a lot of people or a lot of things that I might choose to stand up for otherwise, I can do that through my work.
Love that. And isn't that a blessing and a powerful thing to be able to understand because some of us don't have a place to have our real voice be heard. So just to be able to lean on something you're passionate about to still be able to be an advocate, be an activist, and to promote change through your work. So We Dance. Let's talk about that a little bit. What inspired this particular collection of work? And I think about you and what I've heard just today and what I know of you as a person, and I'm not surprised at the direction, but it's a really beautiful direction. So tell us what inspired you.
Yeah, thank you. So I've talked a lot. So instead of me telling you right away, I'll come back to it. I want to show you what inspired me. So if I can, I want to invite Madison Baltimore, who's going to read a poem by Hope Boykin. And I'm going to also invite Tim Barker, who's going to perform an original dance. And they'll show you exactly what it was that inspired this show.
We are together, coming together. When we stand together, move together in this moment, we are pointing towards our ways to express and show truth and love. When patience and circumstances, hatred, try to bring us down, confusion creeps in, trying to mute our voices without knowing who we really are. But we are more than just what they think they see. So here it is, how we need to and must show you through our eyes. We are witnesses living in it and through it, and we were born from this. Our heritage, our past is built on a perspective some have skewed or tried to skew, but our train, this journey forward will not slow or stop. Our mission is to push, to learn, to lift, to teach, to encourage, to build, to support, to carry, to bridge, and to raise our communities. You, growing your hearts and feeding your souls. Our hearts hurt now, yes, we are exhausted. Our hearts are tired now, weary and worn, but through it all, through it then more than 60 years ago and through it now, we persevere. Always loving, moving, creating, sharing, even with our heavy hearts. This is hard for you and all of us, but our path is set and we are not holding back. We are not giving in. We will continue to share. Our voices ring loudly through our body's language. Our voices ring loudly through our body's language. Our voices ring loudly through our body's language. And when our hearts break, we get up. When our hearts break, we stand up. And when our hearts break, we dance. We dance. We dance. We dance. We dance. We dance.
It was just like deep, like I felt it. I felt the dance, the words, and along with the choreography was just absolutely brilliant. So now I know everybody's like, okay, we want to know more about the works, what's in it, we want to see it. So tell us.
Yeah, so, and before I really start talking about the work, I'll say that my family and I, we've been fans of the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater for years. And one of our traditions has been me, my mother, and my Nana, every time that they come to Cleveland, even when I lived in Baltimore, we would go in so that we could see them perform. And so this show was really inspired by first being a fan of that dance theater. This show was inspired by that poem by Hope Boykin, because as you could hear through the words and the beautiful display of artistry that we just saw, there's so much power in art, and art informs art. And so as an artist, it's not like I just go and look at other sculptors or painters to be inspired. I find inspiration in music. I find it in film. I find it in dance. I find it in fashion. I find it in writing, because all of the arts come together in a beautiful way. And so as I was creating these pieces, that poem really moved me through the rest of the collection from 2020 on. And so, yeah, let's get into the specific artwork.
Turn this way.
So, this is Transference. So I don't know if you all had the chance to actually go out in the hallway yet to view the works. If you have, you've seen these already. If not, just highlighting a few of the pieces. So Transference, thinking about this one, most of the time when I'm creating artwork, any painting, in particular a painting, an oil painting will take me between 4 to 8 hours, right? So this is a 48 by 24 oil on canvas, usually 4 to 8 hours. This took 5 years. And I'll tell you why. It wasn't because it was an overly complex piece. It was because I took a really long break from my artwork, a really long break. So after doing that show in 2010, I didn't touch my art again until 2015 at all. And in 2015, I saw Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater. I saw this pose. I thought to myself, I have to capture this. I'm going to do this painting, right? And I came and I drew it, and this canvas sat around our house forever, just in a pencil state. Like I had just drawn it. And then I started with, one person, and had one person done for like a year. And I was like, oh, I'll come back to it at some point. But honestly, the reason this took so long is because I couldn't figure out my space in this world as a wife and a mother and an employee of someone else and an artist. And one of them had to give. And so for me, although my art is what centers me and keeps me grounded, it's what I gave up in order to make sure I was dedicating myself fully to learning how to be all of those other things well. And so when I finally came back to it, we were living here in Ohio. So this got packed up by a moving company and brought here. And then on December 31st, 2020, I told myself, if there's anything that I wanted to finish doing this year, it's that piece. And so I went down to my art studio. We have a small studio that's kind of like in the middle of my husband's man cave and my kids' playroom. But it's my art space, it's my creative space. And I told myself, no matter what it takes before the new year comes in, this piece is going to be finished. And so it was the last piece of that year, but I was so glad to have this one done.
And it's absolutely beautiful. And if there's any mothers in the room, we know a little something about making, priority versus passion, and how we have to sometimes shift when each one can be the priority. So this is incredible, and it's very beautiful and very detailed.
Peace and power. So this piece almost became like the staple piece for this show. It was on the flyer to advertise it. And, I think that the name captures it perfectly. My goal here with this piece was really to capture the dancer's strength, to capture her beauty, to capture really the fact that when you look at it, I want you to experience this moment of peace and just kind of surrendering to what you see on the canvas. This is also an oil on canvas, 16 by 20. But then also to feel her power. When you look in her eyes, there's peace there, but she also is in control of her body and her space and knows that she's going to captivate whatever audience is looking at her. And so that was my goal here. And I'll tell you, the fun thing about this piece was that, so I did this one nearing the end of 2022. And my favorite color is orange. So with her skin tones, I intended for this dress to be orange. And my youngest daughter came into the art room just as I was about to start painting the dress. And she said, "Don't do orange. This needs to be purple." And I was like, purple, I set out for this to be orange. And if you ever have done anything where like you're creating, in your mind, you have the outcome already. So shifting gears and changing paths is really hard. But I gave in to the change and the flexibility. And I was so glad that I did, because when I finished this piece, I stepped back and I was like, you were right. Purple was perfect. So that was a great moment.
It is really beautiful, and I definitely see power in her expression, commanding,
So this is the title piece of the show, When Our Hearts Break, We Dance. So I've shortened the show, of course, to We Dance, but the title of this piece is When Our Hearts Break, We Dance. And I don't even finish that in the text because the positioning is what's showing you that. And this to me was a piece that meant so much because, one, it's a mixed media piece. I don't do mixed media, so it was me expressing myself in a different way. So this is a 48 by 24 wood panel. So it's on wood. The dancer is in pastel on paper. And then the wood is painted with acrylic with the words in paper. And then the newspaper clippings are what make this significant. So I did this piece right after we started to really come to terms with what was happening in 2020 with the killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. And I was at a period in my job professionally where I was being asked to lead us strategically through how to get people to talk about these things and navigate these things. But I had to hang on to my own emotions, and I was hurting. I was hurting for us as a nation. I was hurting for us as a people. And when I say us as a people, I identify as a Black woman, as a woman of color. And I was hurting for the fact that we seem to see history repeating itself and we've learned nothing from it. And so when I said earlier that what I've learned about myself as an artist over the years is that I can express myself in my artwork, this piece was fully that. And so I found newspaper clippings, and when you go out in the hallway and you look at this piece, you'll see that what I did was I found these newspaper clippings, and then in red, I drew around the names of people like Trayvon Martin and Tamir Rice and Freddie Gray and George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Sandra Bland and so many others. And, you know, the hashtag was say her names, say their names. And there were so many hashtags, but to me, my heart was just broken. And social media is not my activism, art is, right? And so I poured it into this piece. And around that same time is when Hope Boykin's poem came out that you just saw. And I thought that it was beautiful that what I heard in that poem was that she said, like, we're going to continue. We won't give up. We won't quit. We're going to ride this train and people are going to see us. And I put that into this piece where it was like, yeah, you're going to see this art. And when you look at it from a distance, you'll just see this beautiful dancer. But when you get up close, you'll experience what it is that's making him dance. And in this moment, it's heartbreak, it's heartache and pain. And that's what was behind this piece for me too. It was a way for me to just express physically and verbally, like, everything that I was experiencing in that time. And then the last thing I'll say on this piece is that I used to work in a town called Gettysburg, where a great battle was fought and people died there. And working there, I gained such a strong appreciation for history. And exploring the battlefields and the monuments there was something that if anybody can ever just get the chance to go to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, there's an eeriness. It's always foggy, beautiful sunrise and sunset, but it's always foggy. And there's so much blood in the soil over a war that was fought, really over power and control. And I still don't think we've learned what it was Abraham Lincoln tried to tell our country that day. But what I tried to capture here in this piece also was this battle over Confederate statues coming down. And so being in a space where I actually had a great appreciation from being able to put a face to a person who caused harm because of these monuments, right? It made me appreciate history in a way that I think that sometimes we're trying to erase. And it makes me think about my work today when I think about the conversations around critical race theory and our children not being able to read certain books in school, not being able to say certain things without being censored. And I think that we all forget that in erasing the past history, we're also erasing our current. So what's going to happen in the future when people are looking back and trying to figure out who we were as a people in this time, when we're trying to erase everything, right? So you won't get a chance to truly see how we've evolved as a people or a culture if we erase everything. And at the same time, symbols of hate can't just exist. And so we have to find a balance. And so that's what this is about, is finding a balance of preserving history while also recognizing harm. And that's all I'll say on this piece.
Oh my goodness, and you can tell she is passionate about that one, and I'm sure all of them, but it is true, it is a heavy time. Things are moving, I don't want to say forward, but along, but during that time it was quite heavy. And again, many of us, like you said, we had to go to work and do what we were hired to do, even while holding all of that pain, all of those feelings, the inability to come in and say, this is how I really feel, and no, I don't feel like writing a strategy right now. I just want to sit here and watch CNN to, catch up on what's going on so that I know what's happening in our country. So just being able to translate that into something so incredible, because if you just look at it on the surface, like you said, that's not what you would get, but up on it, you could, and it's just so powerful, just the circling of the names, connecting that to just keeping their names in the forefront and not forgetting who they are as people. It's wonderful. It is really, really wonderful, and I felt that everything you said right here. So thank you for that. I don't even know how you can top it.
I had fun with this series. So this Dance Out of My Clothes is a mini series that is a part of this bigger series, of course. And I had fun with this one because, one, it was me getting back to charcoal. So when I talked about my 7th and 8th grade art teacher, Keith Holliday, and I said that he taught us like these very serious skills, he taught me in charcoal. And it was with people. And so this series, it was me trying to tell myself, get back into your art on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. And so you can do that quicker with charcoal. I can do a charcoal drawing in a couple of hours. So I started with the center panel, the one where he's holding his jacket. And it, again, was inspired because I went to see Alvin, Ailey American Dance Theater with my mom and my Nana. And I came home and this dancer had just performed, and I started following him on IG. And when I looked up his page, I saw that he had all these other pictures of him dancing. And I decided, like, oh, I can turn this, even though he hadn't connected it as a series, I told myself, oh, I can turn this into a series. And what it made me think about was a ring shout. Are you familiar with ring shouts?
No.
So it made me think about a ring shout. So a ring shout, it originated in Africa. And my family is Jamaican, and so it also had origins in Jamaica and Trinidad and places like that. But what it is it's a very spiritual act, and there's no music involved, but people typically stand in a circle and they go counterclockwise. And I see Tim nodding his head, the dancer in the room. They go counterclockwise, and the music and the things that come from it are from their bodies, right? So it's their hands and the rhythm, and it's the movements, and it's a way to come closer to God. And so when I saw this, I thought to myself, like, wow, he danced so hard, he danced out of his clothes. And that's what I thought when I was seeing, even though they weren't connected, that's how my mind connected it. And the reason I was so excited about this is because after doing the first panel, which it was my first time touching charcoal in a while. And so you'll see in the images that I'm talking about, like I hadn't touched my art in a while, you'll actually notice those pieces have less detail because I was finding myself again, right? And then by the time I got to the next one, which ended up being the first in the series because he was still dressed, I had honed in more on kind of the technique of my charcoal again. And so that technique shows up a bit more, and you can see that it's more refined than that first piece that I started with. But with that second piece, I remember vividly when I was creating this series, like dreaming about it and getting up out of my sleep and going down to my art room. Like, I just have to lay one more line. I have to do one more dot. Or I would take pictures, and that's one of the things that I do to tell myself if I'm done with a piece, right? Is I take a picture on my phone, and then no matter where I'm at, I can look at where I was with that piece. So if I'm having a bad moment, I can look at my art and think about it. If I'm having like a moment of like clarity around something, I can look at my art and think about it. And so I would look at it on my phone, and then I'd jump out of bed or I'd race home, and I'm like, oh, like that shadow wasn't right. Let me go and fix that, right? And so it was just such a fun series. And so then by the time I got to the third piece where he literally is like backwards, it's because the ring shout is counterclockwise. And so now he's facing counterclockwise because I see this as this experience of worship and this experience of really coming closer to how we were originally created, which is fully humble and with nothing. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I have him really with nothing and in this pose of just complete humility and really reverence. And it just, to me, was such a fun series to put together. And so although I saw it as three pieces together, it really is, three individual pieces as well. And so it's a fun series.
But it works. It works as like you said, the series of them, because just as you explained it, you could see all three parts. It's almost like, he's getting started, getting a little more into it, and then now he's just totally vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I know this is the last one because I actually just finished this piece. This was my first piece of 2023, Swing Low. So I knew in working with Shelby that I needed to have this art dropped off by January 13th, right? And so I told myself, like, I want to get one more piece in. I want one piece that's from 2023 in the show. And so Swing Low is what came to mind. And so again, really inspired by the strength and beauty of these dancers. This is 3 48 by 24 panels that come together. And what I love about this piece, right, is that you see their individual strength, but he's also holding her suspended midair, mm-hmm. right? And so there's a trust that has to happen there in someone else, and in your own ability, but also in someone else's ability. And I always think about, like, how do my pieces connect with relationships? And so it was for me capturing just that trust and submission to one another. And what I really like about this piece, on the next slide, the versatility, and I created it this way so that it could be displayed as the individual panel of just the dancers, but then you could also just choose the two end pieces and hang those separately, or you could put the two pieces together. I call them the twin panels, though they aren't identical, right? And they come together for really nice abstract as well. But this was just, to me, it was one of those pieces where I saw it before I started it. I saw that I wanted to do this 3-piece panel that had this versatility to it. But at the end of the day, I was just trying to capture that connection that's happening there with the dancers to be able to perform their own artistry.
Yeah, I see the trust, but I also see too some protection, as he holds her in just it's so many things, and the definition of the muscles, which you definitely see when you see dancers in general, but definitely the Alvin Ailey company. So absolutely gorgeous. I think before we move any further, we should give her a hand for what we've seen so far. Because it's still got a couple questions, and then before you, okay. So, so you kind of talked to us a little bit about what you hope, what kinds of emotions or what you want people to, see, think, and feel when they see the works. So I want to ask you, other than what you've already told us, how do you see art as being a catalyst for change?
So art is one of the few things that I think brings everyone together. And I think that that's the starting point when I think about change, right? Is that it doesn't happen in isolation. I'm a student of change. I'm actually working on my doctorate in organization development and change. And so one of the things that I know about change management, right, is that it's not always easy to get people on board with the process of change. But with art, it starts you from this place of just curiosity. And I think that curiosity is something that has to exist in everything that we do. And when we think about the things that need to change the most in this nation, I think that we need to be more curious about how we got here and how we get to wherever it is we aspire to be. And I think that art gives us the ability to just cross all barriers. When you think about seeing people in a gallery viewing artwork, you see people from every phase of life, right? And you don't think about your differences when you're viewing artwork. When you're at a concert, you, no matter the genre, are going to have fans from every background. I'm making you work with this microphone.
I feel like it's not close enough.
When you are at a book club, what art does in every format is the artist, the author, the singer, the dancer, whatever that art form is, brings you into a space where you're experiencing the world for a moment from their perspective, right? And most of the time that has to happen because you're reading whatever it is that they've written about it. You're listening to them in an artist talk. And so you experience it in that way, right? But a lot of times if you don't have the opportunity to be with the artists themselves, you're interpreting it for yourself. And when you do that, you also generally stop to think, what was this person thinking when they did this, right? I don't know about you, but there's never been a book that I've read where I didn't think to myself, I wonder what the author was doing when they wrote this, or a song that I heard where I thought to myself, wow, what were they feeling when they wrote this or sang this? Or a poet where you think to yourself, I can hear the words, but what were they feeling? And that's how art is the catalyst for change, is because for one moment we stop to think about something other than ourselves and from someone else's perspective. And that's what we need to do in this world overall, is really stop focusing so much on ourselves and what we gain, right? And think more about the good of the whole. And if we can just remember what it's like in those moments when we're experiencing art, how we put the differences aside and come together to just have an experience, then I think that would model what we need to do in more of the spaces where we center ourselves first, or we center our differences first. And so I just think that art is a great bridge, and I find it something that's so liberating.
And I think that, it's a nice intersection of your purpose and passion and profession, because I'm sure you had to take some of what you've learned through art into your career, and it's evident, and you are, like I said, blessed to have all of that merged together. So I know people are eager to actually get to see it in person, but we do have one last question, which I'm sure everyone will be interested to know, and it's very simple. What's next? What's on your agenda? What do you want to do next?
It's very simple.
Well, 2 words, simple. Might not be a simple answer.
What's next? I can answer that in so many ways, Candace. What's next with my art? I'm trying to figure it out. Maybe you all can help me. So I'm thinking about either a series just focused on people, individual headshots of people, to try to capture their narratives and, you know, have you experience these headshots, but then dig deeper and actually interview them. And so to have more of an interactive show where it's showing you the art, but also telling you the story behind the person, right? The other thing I'm thinking about doing next with my art is actually for my DOT program, I've been working on this belonging plan on how we're very intentional about creating belonging. And in thinking about that, I've been thinking about somehow merging collaborative art into it. Because one of the things that I love is actually the times where I get to help other people create art, right? And so when I'm invited to lead a paint and sip, that's what they typically are, or when I'm invited to lead some type of collaborative art, right? I love to watch other people get into it. And so I'm wondering if maybe that's the next thing that I do, is in writing about like this belonging plan, if I intentionally experiment with getting other people to create pieces, and then I also create pieces that are centered around how belonging is experienced. So maybe you all will be able to give me some feedback on which way I should go next. But, you know, that's on the art side. Professionally, I'm also at an intersection in transitioning from being the Chief Diversity and Belonging Officer at Bowling Green State University to being the Chief People and Culture Officer at the Toledo Museum of Art. And so I think that what's next there is actually what you just mentioned, and that's this beautiful merging of really all of who I am professionally and with my passion for art into one space. And so I'm excited for that next chapter as well. And, you know, I think that the very next thing that I need to focus on is finishing this dissertation so that I can get done with school. So lots of things are next. But as far as the art is concerned, I would love to just hear what people would like to see, and especially after they experience this show.
Well, thank you for that. Congratulations on your new role. And you are going to just blow them away, and I think that the culture is going to be so much better because you are there. So they should be so proud to have you on their team. And there's nothing wrong with a good paint and sip, by the way, because that makes people like me who have zero artistic talent feel like I can do a little something. So you can even inspire even the most remedial level artists like myself. So that's all the questions I have. Are you going to take audience questions? So that's all the questions we have up here. So again, we want to give her another round of applause, and then she'll take questions from the floor.
Thank you, Candace.
Oh, you're welcome. I was honored to do it. This was a wonderful, wonderful discussion about some absolutely beautiful art, and it's so meaningful to me just being from Toledo, also identifying as a black woman, to see another black woman shine in this way. I'm just happy to be a part of it.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.